All right, let's jump right into this incredibly atmospheric explainer. Today, we're descending into a grim, dark philosophical fable to explore a concept that's absolutely fascinating: the violent return of the repressed. We're going to use a Nietzschean lens, what we'll call the diatribe of inverted truths, to really unpack psychological growth and shadow integration. Basically, we're asking what happens when the parts of ourselves we desperately try to shove under the floorboards finally break loose and demand to be felt. To set the scene, picture this. We're plunging directly into the ruins of the Cathedral of Stained Glass. The cold, wild wind of reality is literally howling through the jagged gaps of shattered dogmas. And right there, sitting on the altar and draped in a pale inquisitor's hood, is the truth-telling monster. His claws are stained with the pink syrup of the old Redeemer. But get this, he isn't here to preach divinity. He's here to enforce the guttural law of reality. And his core message is chillingly simple. I offer the Inquisition of hunger. So what's the actual conflict here? Well, it perfectly contrasts two opposing forces. On one side, you have the old dogmas, the old judges, who demanded this paralyzing, perfect purity. They wanted to save people from the burden of feeling by feeding them a kind of sugar-coated numbness. On the flip side, you have the monster. He acts as an inquisitor of the real. He demands we actually face the messy pulse of being. Instead of saving you from your tragedy, he anchors you to your own rot. He forces you to experience authentic tragedy rather than just existing as a paralyzed monument to a life you never really lived. To really wrap our heads around this, let's look at an incredibly tense, guttural dialogue that happens right there in the cathedral. It's between the monster and a figure known as the ugliest man or the honest guest, whose face is described as a tapestry of twisted tragedies. The monster looks down at him and explains that the old judges use their power to carve people into these unnatural states of perfection. He growls, "The old judges sought your hidden stains to carve you into a state of perfect purity. They wanted to eliminate any trace of messy human reality." But the honest guest isn't just taking this at face value. He rightfully questions this terrifying new authority, asking the beast, "And what do you offer? A new cage?" And honestly, this is deeply relatable, right? The honest guest represents our own natural skepticism, our fear of embracing our darkest psychological shadows. When our old, comforting dogmas are shattered, our first instinct is usually to view the raw, hungry reality of our shadow as just another trap, something terrifying we absolutely have to defend against. Here's the crucial twist, though. The monster is not evil. Rather, he's acting as a harsh psychological mirror and forcing this diatribe of inverted truths to actualize our unlived lives. He tells the guest, "I am the monstrum, the omen, the repressed elements of our psyche that we shoved under the floorboards just to maintain our illusion of purity." Now, as the judge, he's not punishing us for our sins. He's punishing us for hiding. He's forcing the shadow out into the blinding light. Okay, moving along to the parable of the bitter well, from pink syrup to authentic tragedy. Let's break down the exact chronology of how this psychic dissociation gets shattered. Step 1. The citizens are successfully saved by the Pale Redeemer's pink syrup, literally floating around like ghosts with plastered-on smiles. Then, step 2, the monster arrives and poisons their well with iron and salt. That's the literal taste of their repressed tears. Step 3 is the real shocker, waking up from that numbness to realize they are rotting corpses. But step 4? That's the redemption. Because for one glorious moment, they finally feel the cold, wild wind of reality. There's a really fascinating philological layer here, too. The citizens were told the pink syrup would loosen them from their pain, but by tasting the iron and salt of the monster's cure, they are, paradoxically, cured of their sugar-coated numbness. If you look at the root of the word loosened, los, it doesn't mean escaping reality. It means being freed from psychic dissociation. It's about finally feeling the tragedy of your own blood, instead of just drifting through life as a numb ghost. Next up, let's look at the inversions of the Inquisitor: scalpels, mirrors, and floorboards. This is a great breakdown of how the monster targets different forms of ego inflation and defensive purity, entirely replacing them with visceral anchors to reality. In each of these parables, the false purity, whether that's memorizing dead languages, an ego-driven palace of mirrors, or sacred bread, is completely, violently dismantled. For example, look at the banquet of floorboards. The high priest's sacred bread is thrown out, and the monster demands they eat raw earth and bitter roots instead. It's a total inversion of everything they were taught. Let's zoom in on the story of the scholar for a second. He tried to muffle his primal unconscious with dead languages, hiding behind the purity of church Latin. Well, The monster inquisitor pays him a visit. But he doesn't use a quill to seek out sins. He uses a rusted hook. Every time the scholar tries to speak a pure thought, the monster hooks his tongue, demanding he display his internal hunger externally. It's brutal. The scholar dies with his guts spilled across his books, but in doing so, he finally reveals the messy pulse of being he spent his entire life denying. Then we have the parable of the mirror. Here, a king built a palace of mirrors to reflect only his brilliant light. But the monster steps in and forces him to wash his mud-covered feet, making him look in the mirror to see that his attempt to be purely divine was actually his true hidden fault. The takeaway? Sovereignty and dirt are proportional. You simply cannot have the soaring heights of the ego without the grounded dirt of the shadow. Our shadow is totally inseparable from our substance, a vital concept when we talk about psychological integration. All right, let's head into our final section, the philology of our terror and the commentary of the monster inquisitor. As we descend to the absolute bottom of the underworld, the cathedral's crypt, the monster demands what he calls a philological archaeology of our terror. He explains that the old inquisitors utilized self-negation. They offered this sterile eternity of nothingness, rather than true salvation. Think about it. Their idea of saving you was to lock you in a windowless room of purity, right? They sought out any stain of living just to scrub it away, essentially ensuring you never truly lived at all. Instead, the monster specifically hunts for what he calls the Faustian fist. Now, what is that? It's that tight clenching of control that leads only to decay. It shows us that what we so often call absolute sovereignty is really nothing more than an ego-inflated defense mechanism. It's a defense against the will, the vital spirit, the wind of life that we actually fear the most. We trade our blood for gears, desperately trying to control everything, and in the process, we literally choke off our own life force. So ultimately, we're left with this massive paradigm shift. The old inquisitor was a master of self-negation, enforcing that windowless room with a quill filled with ink. But the inquisitor of the real uses a quill filled with blood to force us to integrate our underground twin. And in a stunning twist at the very end, we realize that the honest guest, that ugliest man with the tapestry of tragedies, has actually claimed the throne. He's there to ensure our sacred dogmas are shattered, so the vital spirit can finally flow through our hollowed remains. So, I want to leave you with this provocative thought to ponder today. When the monster inevitably comes to your palace of mirrors, which master are you going to serve? Are you going to cling to the illusion of perfect purity, safely locked away but completely numb? Or will you embrace the authentic, hungry reality of your own pulse and finally eat the bitter roots of the real? The choice between the unlived life and the messy pulse of being is entirely yours.